Greetings and welcome to ValorTube.com. My name is Paul Lear, and I'm an original content provider with ValorTube.com. And I'd like to welcome you to This Week in Prophecy. And we're going to start in Jerusalem, give you guys some landmarks down here in the kind of bottom center. This is the Temple Mount. We got the Dome of the Rock, the Golden Dome. They have the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And then north of there, we think where a third temple may possibly go. I know if you listen to those folks from the Temple Institute, they want to park it and build the third temple north of the Dome of the Rock. But we're interested today up here in the northwest corner or northwest of the Temple Mount in Har Hatzvim. And we're going to go to the Times of Israel. And this came out today. Quarry that may have been source of Second Temple stones uncovered in Jerusalem. Archaeologists say find provides clear demonstration of various phases of stone preparation and can help them recreate and test ancient methods described in biblical sources. So as far as how people should mine stone, according to the good book, it appears this quarry fits all the criteria. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going into the details of this. If you want to read it, go to timesofisrael.com. Quarry that may have been source of Second Temple stones uncovered in Jerusalem is the link. And I think it's about 2,000 years old. Har Hatzvim means quarryman's hill. Large-scale building projects in ancient Jerusalem, such as the Temple Mount, required a vast amount of building materials and ability to organize and coordinate the quarrying and transportation of thousands of building blocks to the ancient city. So if you go back to the map here, so we're looking at roughly 1.5 miles, 2 miles. They would have had to carry these stones. It's clearly doable, but it's something that's in the news. And frankly, there's archaeological evidence pouring out of Israel every week. Somebody could spend a show just doing nothing but archaeological evidence coming out of Jerusalem and Israel that the Jewish people have ties to the area and they actually live there, and they're some of the original people who settled there, but the critics, for whatever that's worth, are not going to believe anything. We want scientific evidence. Well, you get it. Here's some more of it. They'll excuse it away. But nonetheless, stone fits the bill. The quarry fits the bill. Likely, they think that may have led to the building of the second temple. So it'd been Herod's temple. And from there, we're going to go to Israel opposes President Biden's plan to reopen U.S. Palestinian mission in Jerusalem. So what this would be the Palestinians want to become a country. And so the United States under Trump shut down the quote Palestinian embassy. Actually, it wasn't an embassy. It was more of a mission. An embassy would indicate that they're actually a country. Trump shut that down, stopped funding to these folks. And now Biden is planning to reopen the Palestinian mission in Jerusalem. This took place on September 1st. Incidentally, take it or leave it, but the day this was announced that, hey, we're considering reopening a little mission for the Palestinians, this would be the day the remnant of what was Hurricane Ida hit the Northeast. Massive amounts of flooding in New York City, the worst flooding in the history of New York City. Philadelphia, New Jersey were hit by tornadoes, destruction up and down the Northeast corridor. Now, some would say that, maybe God's saying, hey, this is a bad idea. The Jews say it's a bad idea. To reopen the consulate in Jerusalem that's traditionally been a base for diplomatic outreach to the Palestinians is a bad idea. And essentially, this would be redividing the land. And we know what God has to say about that in the book of Joel. Do not divide the land. Now, that said, it's written in past tense. that the land will be divided. It's going to happen. So the question is a matter of when, not if. You're not supposed to do it, but it is going to happen. It's prophetic, and God writes it, or the prophet Joel writes it as God told him in past tense. It's like, well, it's a foregone conclusion. It's going to happen. So, here's a comment from Foreign Minister Yair Lapid. We think it's a bad idea. Jerusalem is the sovereign capital of Israel and Israel alone, and therefore we don't think it's a good idea. We know that the Biden administration has a different way of looking at this, but since it's happening in Israel, we are sure they are listening to us very carefully. I mean, after all, it is their country, and they should be allowed to operate sovereignly. Further down, as Secretary Blinken announced in May, the United States will be moving forward with the process to reopen our consulate in Jerusalem. We do not have any additional information to share at this time. So the Biden administration seems to be bent on dividing the capital of Jerusalem and going against God's word. Says don't divide the land, don't divide the capital, don't divide Jerusalem. Well, okay, we're going to do it, and that's bad foreign policy. Goes back to the Abrahamic covenant in Genesis. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. I know that sounds crazy talk to think that any country's foreign policy is based on how it relates to what God says about his people Israel, and that depending on how you relate to Israel will determine how you will be blessed or cursed. But it says what it says. Do what you want with it, but it's real. It's what God said, and something to think about. From there, we're going to go to Australia in regards to encroachment of freedoms, and this kind of falls under the guise of going to a one world government. This world is ripe for this sort of thing right now, and all in the name of safety and keeping people from getting sick. It's about healthcare concerns. Australia traded away too much liberty, and this is from the Atlantic. Highly recommend reading this article. This is in Australia. Before 2020, the idea of Australia all but forbidding its citizens from leaving the country was unthinkable. And Australia's borders are currently closed, and international travel from Australia remains strictly controlled to help prevent the spread of COVID-19. And that's per a government website. International travel from Australia is only available if you are exempt or you have been granted an individual exemption. And that's coming from the government. And we go down further. Interstate travel. This is the money quote right here. Interstate travel within Australia is also severely restricted. And the government of South Australia, one of the country's 6 states, developed and is now testing an app, a smartphone app as Orwellian as any in the free world to enforce its quarantine rules. Listen up and pay attention to this. Returning travelers quarantining at home will be forced to download an app that combines facial recognition and geolocation. The state will text them at random times, and thereafter they will have 15 minutes to take a picture of their face in the location where they are supposed to be. Should they fail, the local police department will be sent to follow up in person. We don't tell them how often or when on a random basis. They have 15 minutes to reply. And this is Premier Stephen Marshall explained. I think South Australians should feel pretty proud that we are the national pilot for the home-based quarantine app. I would not be proud to be a part of that. And I just can't imagine. I mean, that's in Australia. This is one of the allegedly freest countries on the planet. Now, I can't confirm these, but here's some things too that are also going on in Australia, and this is just a collection that somebody's found on Twitter. Australians, thank you for giving up your guns and showing the United States what happens. Remember that they had a big gun confiscation. Actually, it wasn't a confiscation. Citizens were free to turn in their guns, and the government's going to protect them, of course. And here's what's happening. And this is a good reminder to all of us here in the United States and also other Western forward-thinking countries who still have freedom of firearms. And this is what's going on in Australia. Quarantine camps are being built, army to patrol the streets, to lock people inside their homes, unarmed civilians shot with rubber bullets, children tear gassed. Again, I can't confirm all of these, but some of these I've heard and I've read stories about. Forced to download the app. We just covered that. A new surveillance law allows police to delete and modify files on your device and take over social media accounts without a judge warrant. Others fined $1,000 for talking to each other. Police patrolling children's playgrounds to make sure kids aren't playing. Police helicopters flying over parks, blaring messages, warning people not to exercise. I've seen articles on that one. QR code to enter any playground that's open. Man jailed for 8 months for organizing a protest against the government. Arrested and sentenced in only 24 hours. Emergency powers granted to the police to break into any land, building, or vehicle with any force necessary, which will be no problem because the people don't have guns. Undergo medical exam, tests, or treatments. All of this is in the name of safety, health safety. Put people into quarantine, prohibit people's movement, force people to give info. Full-blown social credit system to crack down on bad behavior online. Sounds like China. We're going to talk about them here in just a second, some of the things they're doing. And you can't leave the country. And this is what's going on in Australia. Now, I'm sure people say, this is not true. You're spreading fake news, blah, 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 whatever. This showed you an article from the Atlantic. And I've seen other articles written about some of these. And I'm sure some of these are extreme examples where somebody's gone too far. But nonetheless, an unarmed population is at the mercy of their government. I mean, it sounds kind of like the Taliban. Don't worry, we're here to protect you now. And I know people think, well, this will never happen in the United States, or this will never happen in Australia, but look at what happens, and look at how quickly it's happened. All this has happened since about what? Late 2019, early 2020, since COVID. And it's all under the guise of the government will protect you. The government will grant you your security. Just turn in all your weapons, and Big Brother will handle it. And we go from Australia, we go to China. This is from the AP. This is outstanding. China bans men it sees as not masculine enough from TV. So China is cracking down on effeminate men. We will have none of that on television. President Xi Jinping has called for a national rejuvenation with tighter Communist Party control of business, education, culture, and religion. He's wanting to promote a, quote, revolutionary culture. And so here is the statement that went out from the Chinese government. Broadcasters must, quote, resolutely put an end to sissy men and other abnormal aesthetics. And that's from the National Radio and TV Administration from the People's Republic of China. And not only that, this was a very unwoke thing to do. They used an insulting slang term for effeminate men, Yang Pao, or literally their girly guns. So, holy cow, the woke culture of the United States just would not put up with this nonsense whatsoever from these communists and Chinese. And the Chinese concern, the official concern that Chinese pop stars, influenced by the sleek, fashionable look of some South Korean and Japanese singers and actors, are failing to encourage China's young men to be masculine enough. We are going to have masculine men in China, and we're not going to have any of these what do they call it? Girly guns, Niang Pao. Not going to have that in China. Real men in China. Broadcasters should avoid promoting vulgar internet celebrities. Xi's government is also tightening control over Chinese internet industries. Game developers have been hit. Rules took effect Wednesday, limiting anyone under 18 to 3 hours per week of online games. And online games are prohibited on school days. I'll tell you what now, talk to your average American teenager under 18. How do you think that'd go down if President Biden were to announce, okay, no more games, no more online games, no more internet for fun on school days, and then on the weekends you are limited to 3 hours over the weekend, and they would enforce that. I mean, we would have an absolute full-blown meltdown of kids in this country, in the United States, if these types of things were to be put into effect. I mean, so, you know, and as a culture, it's not just young people, it's us here in the West, in the United States. We are so used to doing whatever we want whenever we want. And just the idea of being told, no, you cannot do this by a central authority, there would be, I would suspect, a pretty massive revolt, regardless of your party affiliation. We like our freedoms. Don't tell us what to do. And I'm sure the Australians like their freedoms too, but they've turned over their right to defend themselves, and they're being exploited already in short order. And we better pay attention here in the West, because the same, and I know people hear this as, that ain't happening here. Well, I'll tell you what, you give up your ability to defend yourself, and you give up your ability to control your own safety. You watch what happens in a country. Just keep your eye on Australia and watch what happens with those folks. Something to keep your eye on, and it's a big deal. And in this respect, China, of all places, is in alignment with God's word on this particular issue. We get this from Deuteronomy 22, verse 5. A woman shall not wear a man's garment, nor shall a man put on a woman's cloak, for whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord your God. So the good Lord has a problem with cross-dressing. I dare say you could throw transgenderism into this issue, and he would have some things to say about it, and he says it is an abomination to him. And here's the thing, you know, and I know all you folks who are woke and politically correct, and you think you're fresh and you're on the cutting edge and transcending culture with your progressive ideas, but apparently this was going on, you know, as Israel was wandering the desert coming out of Egypt. Because this is the context of this. Moses was told this stuff out in Mount Sinai, and this is before they entered the land, crossed over the Jordan from the east into the west, into what we know as modern-day Israel. Some of this stuff was apparently going on, you know, 1,700 years before Christ? Enough of it was taking place that God, you know, had to tell Moses, hey, women should dress like women, men should dress like men. Now, if it wasn't going on, then the Lord knew the future and knew these things would come to be, and he's prophetic in that sense. But either way, everybody wants to call the Bible this little old book. It's just all these crazy little do's and don'ts and laws and stories and whatever. But it anticipates, you know, stuff like cross-dressing, transgenderism from, you know, you look at Moses 1700 years before Christ. So here we are, 3,700 years later. And what God told Moses on Mount Sinai as they're wandering through the desert is every bit as relevant then as it is today, you know, essentially 3,700 years later. So you may not like it. the critic will have a problem with it, and the people who are engaging these behaviors will have a problem with it. But you gotta say this at the very least, that there's provision taken for this type of behavior. God's aware of it. He was aware of it 3,700 years ago. He didn't like it then. He doesn't change, so he still has a problem with it now. And as he sees it, it's an abomination. And I know that's very harsh for people to hear. And I would also ask, don't come to me and sending me a bunch of nasty stuff. Your issue's not with me. Your issue is with what God has to say about behavior and how you're supposed to conduct yourself, and you're responsible to Him. Take it up with God. Take your complaint to God Himself. He's a big boy. He can handle it. You may not like it, but He does address it from at least 3,700 years ago. And He tells you what He thinks about it. So, and by the way, you're just not all that trendy. You're not that fresh. You're not on the cutting edge of anything. And if, like Ecclesiastes says, there's nothing new under the sun. So you folks aren't doing anything that's different or new. You're doing it, and you think it's new because you're doing it. But, humanity has a history of doing these types of things. And there is a sovereign God who has statutes. He has standards, expectations of conduct and how you're supposed to live your life. And we're made in His image. And He made us. And He wants you to behave a certain way. But enough of that. Just know that's there. And know you're not on the cutting edge of anything. You're just not that trendy. You're not that fresh. And with that, we're going to go to Moscow. This is from Al Monitor. There was another article earlier in the week, and I think this is just nonsense what this latest one is, but we're going to talk about it. Is Moscow using the S-400 against Turkey? And so these are anti-missile defense systems. And these are a little bit more technically savvy. These are upgrades from the S-300 to the S-400. Ankara, that'd be Turkey, denies the suggestion from Moscow that a second batch of S-400s is headed for Turkey, and says it's an effort to stall Turkey talks with the United States and Europe, or NATO. And so they come out saying earlier in the week, pretty much a foregone conclusion that Moscow was going to sell these S-400s to Turkey. Now Turkey's kind of backtracking. No, we're not going to do that. And it's just a bunch of smokescreen. They're just posturing from my standpoint. I fully expect Turkey to buy these missile systems, anti-missile systems, defense systems from Russia. The Bible tells us that Turkey will align with Russia and invade Israel, or attempt to invade Israel at some point in the future. And this article says it's still not clear where and when Ankara hopes to deploy the Russian systems and what any possible scenario for their ultimate use will be. Well, I can tell you, they want to stop all the stuff coming in from Israel, from the south. There's good reason. They've already purchased one group, and I know that Turkey allegedly is supposed to be a part of NATO, but they're acting more and more cozy with Russia with each passing day. Fielding questions from reporters during the Army 2021 forum in Moscow, Mikheyev said the final touches were being given to an agreement. Said the deal will be finalized shortly. We're working on it. And shortly means this year, of course. Okay, well, I take them. This is a topic that can be discussed at any time, but we have no such request at this stage, and that's Turkey's response. The Russian side is either declaring its intention or trying to manipulate the cooperation we are engaged in with the United States. Well, I mean, so Turkey's in kind of a tight spot. I mean, they're supposed to be in line with NATO and the United States. President Recep Erdogan, he acted like he was being thoughtful. We are not reluctant about the second batch of the S-400s from Russia or about similar topics. We have taken many steps with Russia regarding the S-400s or other defense industry matters. Okay. Said nothing. And And then we go down further. At this point, Russia has nothing to lose as far as the S-400s are concerned. The sale has been concluded and the money's received. And that's an international relations professor at an Istanbul Bilgi University. It essentially says it's a done deal. Regardless of whether Ankara makes these systems operational or not, this purchase has resulted in doubts about Turkey's commitment to NATO. Yeah, no kidding. And sowed the seeds of discord within the alliance. Well, absolutely. That's the issue. Turkey's kind of in a tight spot. They're supposed to be a member of NATO and allies with Western Europe and the United States, but yet they continue to buy missile systems, anti-missile systems from Russia and get cozy with Iran, which, sworn enemies to NATO. And, they're playing politics. If I was a betting man, which I am, I'll about bet you they buy another set of these things from the Russians. So if you want to check this out, this is from almonitor.com, Moscow using S-400s against Turkey. And we're going to stay with Turkey. And all this has to do with, Ezekiel 38 and 39. Russia and Turkey will come close together. And this particular portion of This Week in Prophecy has to do with the Turkish military has been increasing its drone fleet. Now, before anybody wants to poo-poo and sneeze on this idea, Turkey is among the top 3 in the world in drone producers. And this is from Erdogan, President Erdogan out of Turkey. Ankara cannot turn a blind eye to atrocities around the world. And then I love this quote, technology should bring about peace, not wars. And this is a new generation of drones, and it will operate alongside fighter jets, Erdogan says, and has flown as high as 12,000, almost 12,000 meters. So we're looking at 30, 35, 36,000 feet in the air. Here's a picture of the drone. This is from TRT World, and this took place earlier in the week in Korlu, Turkey. And I saw something else. This is mostly him giving a speech. But there's another one. He's going around with a Sharpie signing all these drones. So putting his symbol of approval with his signature on these drones. So, and this drone is called the Akinci, which is Turkish for raider. That doesn't sound very peaceful, Recep. Why not call it Lonesome Dove or something like that? If this is to bring about peace and not wars, you shouldn't be naming your drones the Raider, but it's a topic for another day. So, anyhow, the military buildup continues with both Turkey and Russia. And that's one of the hallmarks of the Ezekiel 38 and 39 prophecy. There will be a ridiculous buildup of military equipment, and this will look overwhelmingly hopeless for Israel. They will appear to have no chance on paper because of the massive amount of military hardware that Russia, Turkey, Iran, and arguably Libya and the Sudan, Ethiopia area of Africa will bring to this potential invasion. And we're watching it happen. I mean, I suspect that the other top drone producers in the world are probably the United States and Russia, but that's just my guess, or I'm sure China has some stuff too. But Turkey's in the top 3. And then lastly, I'm going to close with this. There's still things going on. And this is from RT, Russia Times. Airlifts out of Afghanistan may have stopped, but thousands of Afghans are fleeing the new regime. Many of them are taking on a perilous march through the desert to get away, as shown by the video that surfaced online. And just watch this. I mean, it's like a modern day exodus out of Afghanistan. And you just have thousands upon thousands of people trying to get away, get out of there. So, sadly, it is what it is. And pictures like this all over the internet. So, appreciate you guys for taking the time to come by and visit valortube.com. Appreciate y'all stopping to watch This Week in Prophecy. Also, remind everybody we got the Fall Feast coming up in a day or two. And if history is any indicator, big ticket geopolitical world events tend to happen in and around the Fall Feast. We also have the 20th anniversary of 9/11. Those folks would like to make a big splash just because of the symbolism of it. Be vigilant out there, pay attention. So, appreciate you guys taking the time to stop and listen. Take care. Have a good one. See y'all next week. Bye.